Hello and welcome to The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. I'm your host, Allison Weiss, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome, I think, our first other Allison guest, Alison Fragale. Allison is an organizational psychologist, a professor at the University of North Carolina Kenan-Flagler Business School, and the best-selling author of Likable Badass, How Women Get the Success They Deserve. Her academic research on status, power, negotiation, and influence have been published in her field's top academic journals, as well as national media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. She is a sought-after keynote speaker who uses behavioral science to help individuals, especially women, excel. Prior to her academic career, Allison worked as a consultant for McKinsey & Company Incorporated. She holds a BA in mathematics and economics from Dartmouth College and a PhD in organizational behavior from the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Allison resides in Chicago with her husband and her 3 children, who are all named after professional athletes. She also loves, in no particular order, cheap coffee, not so cheap wine, fabulous shoes, sushi, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Peloton workouts, Hallmark movies, and the Golden Girls. We hope that you will enjoy today's very wide-ranging conversation with Alison Fragale, and we look forward to seeing you on the other side of this week's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. I am over the moon for today's guest, who is a best-selling author, a PhD, and a professor on a variety of topics that I know women in commercial real estate would love to hear about, like power, influence, and negotiation. Welcome, Alison Fragale, to today's podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am so thrilled that you came by way of Jennifer Hill, who is a colleague of mine, but also your undergraduate college roommate. How fun is that?
Yeah, college classmate. Yes. It's funny how these things come back when you think about yourself as an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, and now your middle-aged selves are finding these great points of connection.
I love it. Well, you are the author of a phenomenal book called Likable Badass. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how you landed on the phrase likable badass, which I know is kind of the culmination of a lot of your research in academic work.
So I don't have this one moment where the idea came to me, but it was a way that I would talk about the science and the ideas that are in the book to people who were not academics. Like, what did I study? Because the academic terms for things are, you always end up having to explain them. And when I said likable badass, people were like, oh, I get what that is, right? I instantly understand. So yeah, it was part of the way I talked about it long before I knew I was going to write the book.
Awesome. And when I think about your book, and I would recommend everybody specifically get the audio book, because I feel like your vocal performance is phenomenal. And hearing you talk about these stories and these different experiences in your work, I think is just so much more compelling. But get the audio book, get the regular book. The concept that I find underpinning a lot of the book is this idea of social capital. And you mention in the book that there are 3 different ways of building social capital. There's self-promotion, which is something that I think us as women often struggle with. There's also promotion of others, and then there's asking for promotion. Can you walk us through and just give us maybe one quick example of each of those different types of social capital building?
Yeah. So the first one, self-promotion, the idea is that people only have to learn about us. They have to learn that we care, and they have to learn that we're capable. How are they going to do that? Well, one way they're going to do it is through interactions or touch points with us. And so that would be, that could be something you've written. Like I wrote, you write your bio or you post something on social media. It could be someone's in a meeting with you and they hear you talk. They read an email you wrote. These are ways that people learn about us. So these are all channels through which we can tell our story. And we often talk about that as self-promotion. We're going to tell a powerful, positive story. I think one of the things when people hear self-promotion is they think that I need to give a 30-minute graduation speech where I talk about all of my accolades. And that doesn't sound very fun. And I would say, yeah, you shouldn't do that day to day. No one wants a 30-minute speech on your life. But self-promotion storytelling comes in small moments that are put in front of us, and all we have to do is not give them away. So a simple
Yes.
one is, how many times a day does someone say to you, "What's up? What's new? How's it going? How's work?" Those are
Yes.
almost glorified just hellos. And the
Mhm.
person, when they're asking you, may not actually care. They've just said it to be polite, but it's a moment to tell your story. And normally we give them away. We just say, "I'm fine. I'm good. I'm busy." There's no conversation there, and the person has learned nothing about us.
Yes.
But there's opportunities to not give people a 30-minute answer, they don't want it, but to make them
Mhm.
curious. So I give a specific example that was I received was I invited a bunch of people to an event I was hosting. A guy that I don't know well, but I like a lot, came to the event. I didn't even remember what he did for a living. And when he
Mhm.
arrived, I just simply politely said, "Oh, hey, nice to see you. How was your day today?" And without missing a beat, he said, "Allison, I had the best day today." It took 1 second. It was perfectly
Yeah.
polite, but what did it
Yeah.
do? It made me
Tell me
curious,
more. Yeah.
right? "Why was your day so good?" So then I started asking him. I gave
Mhm.
him an opportunity to tell me a story, and what he told me in 2 minutes or less was that he had landed a new client. I learned that he was
Amazing.
in wealth
Yeah.
management. He had met this guy for lunch one time after meeting him on LinkedIn. The guy agreed to work with him. And then the second part was important. He said, "I'm really excited, Allison, because this guy has built a lot of wealth, but now that he's
Mhm.
built it, what he wants to do with his wealth is really change the world for the better." And so I'm
Wow.
so grateful that by being able to support him, I am essentially being able to like magnify the impact that he wants to make on the world. It feels really good. And I thought that's all it takes, right? Think about how
Yeah.
much I learned where now I know what he did. I know that he's
Mhm.
successful at it. At least he can convert a client in a single lunch. And I also
Mhm.
know that he cares about more than himself, right? To be able to do good for the world. And that was a lot. And so that's an example of what it means to self-promote, is to simply look for natural opportunities to be able to talk about the care and concern you have for other people and your capabilities, and you don't have to do that every time, but we have a lot of opportunities to do that. So that's one.
Mhm.
The other way people learn about us is
Mhm.
things other people say about us when we're not around. This happens all the time. And
Mhm.
since middle school, we have been conditioned to be afraid of this. Like if I say, "Allison, someone's talking about you behind your back," you're like, "Ugh." The first thing you think of is negative, right? But
Yes.
it can be negative, but so many of the things that happen behind our
Mhm.
backs are positive. So how did we meet? Because
Yes.
Jen introduced us, and
Yes.
Jen said very complimentary things about both of us. So
Mhm.
before we had even talked, we were excited to get to know each other because
Mhm.
another person had said kind things. What Jen did is other promotion.
Yes.
That's really important. It builds our status, it builds our social capital. So when it happens, it feels beautiful and lovely, but we can start to be more intentional about making it
Mhm.
happen more often for us, not just leaving it
Mhm.
to accident or chance. One of the ways, which you mentioned, is for us to be promoters of other people.
Mhm.
And so one rule I live by is, I try to be an evangelical talker upper of the great
Mhm.
work that other people are doing around me.
Yeah.
And whenever I have a positive thought about somebody, I try to verbalize that to put it out there in the world in some
Mhm.
way. And this is really important because one, it's just a fun way to live, to be an ally, to
Mhm.
be a mentor, to
Yeah.
be a lifter upper, right? Great. But it also helps us get that other promotion in turn because relationships exist in reciprocity. Whatever someone
Yes.
does for us, we want to do for them. If you go out to dinner and someone pays the check, you're always saying, "Okay, but I'm paying next time."
Next time. Yeah.
Right? That's what people do. So when you hear that Jen was, like, out there is telling everybody how great you were, like,
Mhm.
somewhere in your mind is like, "Well, what's my next opportunity to do that for Jen?" And when an
Yes.
opportunity comes up, you're much more likely to do it because reciprocity has been triggered. So if
Mhm.
we live our lives talking other people up, a
Mhm.
big percentage of that is just naturally gonna come back to us without us doing anything. So that's the second way. And then the third way is to be more explicit about asking for that other promotion. So
Mhm.
the way I got into working and serving women was really because I taught negotiation and influence. I teach negotiation and influence, and I've done that for over 20 years. And it's an area where a lot of women struggle, feel uncomfortable, and they want to talk about it. And what I always tell people is negotiation is not just for cars, houses, and salaries. It is
Yeah.
asking for anything you want that has value to you. And
Mhm.
sometimes what would have the most value is for another human being to go into an audience and say, "Hey, would you go make an intro for me? Would you go
Mhm.
talk me up? Would you tell everybody about the great thing that I'm doing?" And
Mhm.
when that happens, you're much more likely to get that other
Mhm.
promotion. And people are really grateful to do it because
Yeah.
you're only asking people that already value you to say things they believe are true. And that's a really easy ask. Like if it's
Yes.
reversed, someone you really respect and value wants you to have a conversation with somebody you're already going to be talking to anyway and just say things about them you already believe. You're like, sure, 100%. Why wouldn't I do that? But we don't think of it until
Hmm.
someone tells us it's important. We didn't know it had meaning to them.
Hmm.
And so I always say, think about all the people right now at this moment that know you, respect you, value you, think you're great. How many of them are at this moment saying it out loud?
Hmm.
We don't know, but probably not that many. Not
Hmm.
because they don't think you're great, because it has not occurred to them that saying it in these audiences would mean something to you. So when we ask for it, we get a lot more of it. And I put that advice in the book. I live by it, but it's been
Yeah.
really funny because all the things that I challenge people to do in the book, people, including strangers, will write to me and they'll send me like screenshots. Look, I texted my boss to go to the annual meeting and tell like the other people in these other divisions that I don't know what a great job I was doing. And look, he sent me this message back that he did it, like wanting my validation, like that he did a
Yeah.
good job for me. Like, look, he did it. And I'm like, of course he did it. Like, it wasn't hard, but he was probably busy thinking of a whole bunch of other things that weren't you until you sent him that message. And he was like, oh, I can do that.
I love so much this example. And I think the important thing I just want to underline and bold and asterisk is the specificity of the ask. And it's really funny because I think about our first conversation and I know these things about you, right? That you have these tendencies to want to make introductions, to help other people. And I came to our call without putting much thought into what is something that I could ask for. I think a lot of us feel like we have to have done a lot of things first. We need to make a lot of deposits into the bank before we can make a withdrawal. And I think what you're saying is if we give people the opportunity to help us, usually they'll take us up on it and they'll probably feel better about themselves for it. And we'll get more specific results in alignment with what we're looking for.
Absolutely. So even in introductory conversations, I always say no
Mhm,
matter what the purpose of that conversation is,
mhm.
even if the purpose is for the other person to help you, I always say you should always end that conversation with some general, like, what is it that you care about that I could be helpful with? If you have a specific idea that occurs for you, you can suggest it, but at the very least, make the ask.
Mhm.
And then what's likely to happen is the person will ask you in turn, reciprocity. And
Yes.
you should always have an answer. Actually, I get kind of annoyed when I'm having an introductory conversation and
Mhm.
I ask somebody at the end and they have nothing to say to me. And I think that's a wasted opportunity. You should
Yeah.
always have something. And it can be something easy.
Mhm.
People ask me all the time, and I say, if you've read my book, for example, and you are a person who uses Amazon, Amazon reviews like rule the world. It is really important to people being able to know the book exists online. So if you could put an Amazon review in, that would be really helpful. Now that's easy for someone who has
Huge.
already told me
Yeah.
I read it and I liked it, right? It's one more step. But at least it's something that I have and it does have value. And so the thing you ask for doesn't have to be like, hey, will you commit the next 40 hours to helping me work on some massive project? It can be a small ask in a new relationship. But I think having something because people want to be helpful and the idea
Yeah.
of there's nothing. And I also think that if you do want someone's help, being really specific. I just had a very frustrating call with a woman who had written a book, clearly
Mhm.
was reaching out to me for help, and
Mhm.
clearly didn't know or didn't want to impose. And we
Mm.
had this wishy-washy conversation where she
Yeah.
clearly wanted my assistance. But I'm thinking, you want my help. It's not my job to brainstorm all the different ways
Or
that I
to
may
pull
or
it
may
out
not
of
be
you.
helpful. So
Yes.
at the
Yes.
end, I kind of left feeling like I didn't know what to do to help her. There was no
Mm.
specific ask. And I wasn't going to do that much, not because I didn't care, but simply because I wasn't going to take it on as a project when I
Yeah.
didn't know what had value. And so clear is kind, right? As Brene Brown says,
Mhm.
like go in with
Yes.
it's much better for someone to say, that's too big an ask. I'm not doing it. Or
Yeah.
I can't do it, but let me give you something less. Or I can't do it, but maybe somebody else will. All of those things are better than just the mutual, I didn't get any help. And this person, I don't know what they wanted. And then the whole thing is a fail.
Absolutely. I want to go back for just 1 second to this idea of self promotion because there's a brilliant example in the book from a colleague of yours that I know that you have co opted because I have received one of your vacation responders. and it was legendary. And I forwarded it to several of my female friends in commercial real estate and just said, look at this. Like, this is just brilliant. Tell us a little bit about the well crafted email responder and why it can build so much credibility and maybe brand recognition for you in such an afterthought kind of space.
Totally. So I'll tell two parts of this story that I think are important. There's the woman who taught me this just through her own actions is a woman named Rachel Sheeran. Rachel Sheeran has been an amazing other promoter for me. She has made a lot of great introductions that have actually opened up a lot of professional opportunities for me. But I talk about her in the book for two reasons. One of which is where I met her, and that is I met her in an airport bar.
Yes.
So I always tell people that the next person who could be singing your praises and tell a story could literally be anywhere. And so as we open ourselves up to talk to more people, to tell our stories, et cetera, you just never know. And to limit it to the company we work for or even our industry is limiting it more than is necessary.
Yes.
Like people can open doors. You never know who knows somebody. That's first thing. Second thing is when I meet her and then we can stay in touch after the airport, as I email her, I'm always getting these out of office, always. And I'm like, what is this? Because in my entire life at this point, I've never put my out of office on. I went on a 2-week honeymoon, like I had 3 kids. At no point was my out of office ever on. And I think it stems from my mom when I was a kid. My mom always said, Allison, you never tell people you're going out of town, they'll rob your house. And so as a kid, I was raised, like I really internalized this. And to me, an out of office was just like this big advertisement to the world that you weren't at home or something. And it was people were going to rob your house and people at work were going to wonder what you were doing. I mean, I just was like, it's better to leave under cover of night and return with no one knowing. Okay. But then I get Rachel's messages. And Rachel's messages are not the boring, like, I will be out of the office until August 8th. Please email my assistant. No, her messages, and I put one example in the book, were really brilliant at telling her story. They basically were like, I'm on a stage today, like rocking an awesome keynote with this amazing team. She's also a speaker. And I'm fully focused on them. Like I'm fully going to be focused on you soon. So my response will be delayed. And if you want to text me a cute picture of your dog, here's my cell phone number. And I break down in the book that it's highlighting some really important things, right? It's showcasing her capability. Like I learned she's an in-demand speaker. She's in Hawaii giving a talk. Yeah. But I also learned that she's funny. I learned that she cares about other people. This idea that the reason I'm not responding is because I'm delivering this great experience to them. And I thought I learned so much, and it was a way to tell a story. But most of us think about email as a nuisance, and rather to say, look, and there are these moments, and the beauty of that is you don't have to say a word. And think about how many people email you while you're out in a given day, and all those people learn. So now I do it too. And that's where you got mine. And then other people have done it. And I get similar thing, messages from strangers. I got one from a woman the other day who said, I went to my kid's soccer game and a guy came up to me and said, you're a big deal. And another soccer dad. And she's like, what are you talking about? And of course, everyone gets your out of office, including the soccer team, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So he said, I had no idea what you did, but I got your out of office. I was curious. I spent 45 minutes reading about you online. Now, who knows if anything comes of that, but like, think about now he has the information in his network to know what she's doing and how successful she is. And maybe he passes that on to somebody like that he plays like tennis with. And next thing you know, a connection is made. And so you can tell a story without actually even using words to come out of your mouth if you start to think about all these different channels that we have.
I love it. Just these like bite-sized mini moments and all of the different ripples that can come from them, I think are so, so wise. So great story. Thank you for sharing. As you know, we've talked about this platform, Women Speak CRE, which is all about amplifying women's voices on stages and in the media within commercial real estate, which is a heavily male-dominated field. You, as a speaker, have used your voice, have told your stories on stages all across the country, and in your academic work, presenting your research and drawing your conclusions and helping women and men really navigate both their personal lives and their professional lives more successfully. What do you think the role in public, or what is the role of public speaking as it relates to, the paradigms that you talk about in Likable Badass?
So I think public speaking is just another way, it's like another form of storytelling, right? In which people can learn about you, and also can often, for many people, is seen as a marker of credibility. So if I take a step back and talk about like, what do I study? What do I try to help people
Mhm.
with? What I have tried to help people with is this concept that in academics we call status, which is a word we
Mhm.
use in everyday life, status. But status is how much we're respected and regarded by other people. And so when we talk about somebody being a high status person, what we're trying to convey is that in their circle, in their audience, people value them, people look up to them, people respect them. And that's valuable to all of us. We're all seeking to
Mhm.
be respected in the communities that matter to us. And respect comes from people believing two things about you, which is where the title of the book, Likable Badass, comes from. It comes from people believing that you care about people other than yourself. You're going to make other people's lives better.
Mhm.
And it also comes from them believing that you're capable. You don't just want to make other people's lives better. You have the capacity to do it because you're competent and
Mhm.
organized and skilled. And when people believe those two things, you care and you're
Mhm.
capable, they value you, they respect you. So, speaking one, it is a mechanism to tell a story to more people so that you're
Mhm.
broadening the audience of people who can hear, I care, and I'm capable. When we volunteer to offer our expertise in these situations, right, we're doing it for other people's benefit. And we're
Mhm.
also able to talk about the things that we know and that we're expert in. So that can be a mechanism. But I also think it's not the only mechanism.
Mhm.
Um, I was I'm a surprising convert to social media, like an
Mhm.
introvert who's I'm gonna be 50 in 2 months. Like I didn't
Mhm.
grow up with any of this. So I didn't think I would be a person who would enjoy social. But I find
Mhm.
social is a really great way to be able to disseminate information to a wider audience. In fact, without having to have any conversations with people.
Mhm.
So using social media, which a lot of people do, can be a mechanism for like building that status and building one's reputation to say, I care about other people and I know things, and looking for ways to combine those two messages in the things that we're doing. And so I think these are just all vehicles to be
Mhm.
able to accomplish those two goals and to communicate the aspect of our story.
I love it. And so I am just coming back along with Jen from the Globe Street Women of Influence Conference, which is a huge industry event for senior women within commercial real estate. Lots of executives, lots of entrepreneurs, and women really at the top of their individual verticals within commercial real estate. And a couple big topics of conversation were afoot during the keynotes and the breakout sessions and all of that. One of which is the changing demographics of commercial real estate as an industry. If you actually look at all the commercial industries within the United States, we are the oldest from an average age perspective, next to insurance and banking. So, in the next 10 to 15 years, over 40% of our total industry and nearly 60% of our leaders within commercial real estate will be retiring. So that's a huge generational shift. Thinking about the concepts within your book and in your research, what are some ways that women who might be in that mid career and rising cohort, or women who are at senior levels looking at C suite roles, what are some things that we can do practically over the next several years to position ourselves for this generational shift and the opportunities that it might bring?
That's a great question. I think the first is for each individual needs to get really clear on what they actually want and both what
Yes.
they want to achieve and two, how they want to be seen and
Mhm.
understood. I think there's a mentality, right? We are
Mhm.
all type A high achieving people who basically started at whatever early age we can remember and started to like chase the next brass ring, right? Very successfully. It's like, okay, I need to get good grades this year and then I need to
Mhm.
apply to school and like pick a major and get a job. There's always a thing, a thing, a thing, a thing.
Mhm.
And we've been chasing little rings and you do that really well. And you say, okay, there's a next ring, there's a next ring. But at some point, to your point about retirement, you get to the point you're like, okay, like, what do I do? Do
Yeah.
I just wake up one day and decide I'm done chasing things? Or how does this whole thing work? So, what I really encourage people to do, and I talk about it in the book, is to go into your future to really get very clear envisioning your future self. It could be at your retirement from your current work. It could be 5 years from now, 1 year. You can
Mhm.
decide the time horizon that you want to look into the future. But I ask people a couple of questions. One is, what are the top three things you'd want to accomplish? So imagine
Mhm.
people threw a party for you when you were
Mhm.
leaving your role or retiring. They gave speeches.
Mhm.
What would be the top 3 accomplishments you'd want them to mention? Maybe you would want them to mention a title or a level that you had
Mhm.
achieved. Maybe it would be something that you had actually built within the industry
Mhm.
or done, whatever it is. It could be personal in terms of an
Mhm.
accomplishment. And then what are 3 words that you would want someone to use to describe you? Because people in those
Mhm.
speeches will always say like, she was very patient or tenacious or whatever it is. Okay, patient
Mhm.
and tenacious, those are both good things, but they're different things. So
Mhm.
what are the top 3 things you want? And in terms of how people see you and describe you. And I think this is very, very helpful because what it enables you to do is it enables you to align your efforts today
Mhm.
toward the highest and best use of achieving those things in the future. And
Mhm.
so when we cannot do all things and all the time, and we can't be everything to all people, we will have
Mhm.
moments where we'd say, if I'm going to invest more in these people, I'm either going to make these people mad at me, or I just
Mhm.
am going to have to ignore them and they're not really going
Yeah.
to know much about me. Well, oh, I don't know what to do. I can't do all the things. It's a lot easier if you can say, okay, well, of my choices that I have here, which of
Mhm.
these paths is most likely going to guarantee me that retirement speech that I want?
Yeah.
When you do it that way, it one helps you figure out how to be efficient with your efforts so you do not burn
Mhm.
yourself out. And
Mhm.
secondly, it allows you to make the hard choices. Do I choose this opportunity or that opportunity? How do I react to this person who wants this thing from me? Do I say yes or do I say no?
Mhm.
And that all of those things that tend to around mid-career burn us out and eat us up start to
Mhm.
become a lot easier when we've identified a clear end. And as I said, some of those things can be personal too. Like
Mhm.
an example from my own life is on the personal side. I have 3 kids. Like I
Mhm.
do love being a parent, but I am not a person who really loved like being a parent of babies and toddlers and stuff. And now
Yeah.
my kids are ranged from 10 to 16. I like them more and more every year. I think I will like them the most when they move out. Like I really do feel like I am
Yeah.
well aligned to be the parent of adult children. Like that is going to be
Yes.
my sweet spot. But of course, I had to endure a lot of
Go
years
through all of that. Yeah.
non-adult children. But the fact that for me, like I wanted having strong relationships with my adult children has been this really like important
Mhm.
guidepost that has made some really hard decisions that many women face feel a lot easier. One
Yeah.
is I travel a lot. When
Mhm.
my kids were little, I would miss a lot of things. I still miss a lot
Mhm.
of things. Um,
Mhm.
but missing things when they were little was actually pretty easy for me relative to what I saw
Mhm.
it being like for my friends who were very tormented by it. Like, oh
Mhm.
my God, my kid said a word when I was gone. And my thought was like, they'll probably say a lot of words, like if all goes well. I
Yes.
don't need to be there for all of the words they ever say.
Yeah.
But because I realized whether I was there or not at age 1 was not gonna
Mhm.
have bearing on this thing that I really wanted, which was this strong relationship with them as adults. Now, I actually think about it almost the opposite. Like, when you're
Mhm.
16 and your mom's not there for something, you'll remember that. You may not care,
Yes.
but you'll remember.
Yes.
So I
Oh, for sure.
prioritize them now more than I did when they were little. At the same time, we moved to Chicago
Mhm.
10 years ago.
Mhm.
And we did that because my husband's born and raised here and he had a job opportunity here. But at the time, having my university affiliation at the University of North Carolina, I went remote before it was cool. And
Yeah.
with this big concern about I could keep my job, I was tenured, but
Mhm.
what would it
Mhm.
mean for my status and my influence at work?
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing for people to navigate, like dual career issues. I'm going to make this family decision. But again, the fact that I had this clarity of the end goal made it so
Mhm.
much easier because I thought, there's a much greater likelihood, just statistically, that my
Yeah.
kids will like return to Chicago than they will return to
Uh-huh.
North Carolina. It's just a bigger
Mhm.
city. And so I said, that's a smarter play. And it made a hard decision on the career side feel like a very easy answer. But it was
Mhm.
only because I had that goal of like, what do I want in that future? And I could work backward to then strategize about it.
I love that. I feel like that North Star and even just keeping that in mind as you're making those daily decisions can be really clarifying. And so thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of the themes that you talked about in your examples were also topics that came up in this balancing act that women often have to play if they want to be mothers and want to have families, and this topic of the different on ramps and off ramps that occur in a woman's career versus a man's career. And, you might have to downshift if you're a commercial real estate broker and you're 6 months pregnant and you want to take a more traditional maternity leave. How do you think the workforce in general can be more adaptive to the different on ramps and off ramps that are going to exist in a woman's career? Also, noting that more women are becoming members of the sandwich generation and also taking care of aging parents and holding more of the household and kind of caregiving responsibilities.
Yeah, I think it has to be on both sides, meaning
Mhm.
that organizations, leaders have to recognize that and think that our willingness to accommodate that could be our competitive advantage, right? We would
Yes.
recruit better and more diverse talent if we give people the most diverse ways that they can exist and work in this space. So I think
Mhm.
that's one mentality. I also think the other mentality is nobody cares about your life more than you do. And nobody exactly
Mhm.
knows what you want until you negotiate for it, until you ask
Yes.
for it. And so I see this all the time with men and with women. So I had traditionally have done a lot of work in the military with general
Mhm.
officers, most of whom are men. But I remember listening to this general once tell me about him advising his like the younger people coming up underneath him, all of whom are men, who
Yeah.
says that they feel like they have no work-life balance and the job is brutal
Mhm.
and the travel, the moving and all this stuff is insane. And the guy's like, "I'm a three-star general. I'm not like that much more special than everybody else. And I have left the office at 6 o'clock every single day when I wasn't in war. And I went home and had dinner with my kids." And so
Yeah.
he said, I just decided that was just something I was just not going to bend on. And people started to
Yeah.
realize I wasn't going to bend on it. And guess what happened? People would come find me at 5 o'clock because they knew I wasn't there at 6. He's like, as soon as I made it really clear it was non negotiable, then everyone's kind of started working around it. And it didn't even have to be a thing. He's like, the reason you're not getting that is because you're sitting there at 7. So no
Yeah.
one has understood that that's important to you. And so why would anyone stop talking to you at 6 so you should go home if they know that every night when they go to your office at 7 you're going to be there. So
Yes.
we have to start advocating either through just our behaviors and letting other people fall into place or through our actual actions. Here's what I really care about. Here's what I
Mhm.
really want. And to recognize that most human beings want to make other human beings happy. Do we always get
Mhm.
yeses? No. But step one is them recognizing this really matters. And once people realize what really matters, if they can get what they need out of it, and as
Mhm.
long as they feel like they're not having to give up to make you happy, then people will say, sure, as long as I can figure it out. So I do think this idea of do not sit around and think that someone else is failing you because they haven't offered you the perfect solution. They don't know what it is. They haven't
Mhm.
spent as much time thinking about your life as you do. Advocate for it. And once you advocate for it, if you get a nasty or bad response, then you have gotten some really helpful information that that is not the
Yes.
environment for you. And you take your talent elsewhere as quickly as you can, and you will find a spot where you'll be able to achieve both.
I love it. One of the last things from the Globe Street Women of Influence conference that really, kind of landed for me over the course of the few days was that in this male dominated industry that we're in, we still really have opportunities to lift up and make the experience better for the women that follow behind us and people of color who are joining our industry, which is traditionally older, white, and male dominated. When you are working with organizations or speaking to groups that have similar sorts of demographics, what are things that you suggest to them in order to improve kind of the culture of their industry? Or how would you, I guess, kind of a difficult question for me to summarize, but one of the things I noticed about you when I was listening to your book and then got to know you in person is that you are a girl's girl. And a girl's girl is someone who really, I just think, is focused on uplifting, amplifying, promoting other women. And that's not necessarily a normal thing within commercial real estate because there was this view that there's only a few of us who have risen to the top. And so, in order to protect ourselves and protect this pie that we've built, rather than grow the pie, we're going to fight for our slice. How do you change that mindset and reframe maybe this dynamic of scarcity in terms of opportunities for women in male dominated fields?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So a couple things. One is that the things that the kind of the bias toward women is not something men do to women, it's something people do to women. And it's
Interesting.
important to remember that as women, we are very much have the opportunity to be allies to
Mhm.
everybody, right? Including people who are in our categories. And but we can also, to your point, like be competitors. So a question I get a lot and is phrased in a slightly different way is like, why don't more women support other women? And I'd say, look, there's some science to this, which is that, and you've alluded to it, which is when people feel threatened and insecure, we see this from the science. When people feel threatened and insecure, they tend to behave in very hostile, aggressive, competitive ways. And
Uh-huh.
so if we've made women in all industries feel threatened and
Mhm.
insecure, there's not very
Mhm.
many of us. We get all this
Mhm.
negative biased feedback. If we finally make it, we think, oh my goodness, this house of cards is about to come falling down at any moment. And someone who is under threat is never benevolent.
Mhm.
They are protecting their survival. So I'd say you do not
Mhm.
go to a starving person and get surprised that then you throw them some food and they're not sharing it.
Mhm.
So the couple things is like industry wide as leaders, whoever's listening, to say, if you want more supportive behavior, you need to make people feel more secure.
Yeah.
And when they feel secure, like things are going well for you, you're valued, like you're lifting someone up, they will then turn around and pay it forward. So sometimes they're always
Mhm.
like, the nicest, best boss I've ever had was this like 70-year-old white guy who just was so nice to me and everything. I'm like, yeah, you know why he was nice? Because he wasn't fighting for anything anymore. That guy was rich. He didn't need
Yes.
to work anymore. All he was doing was hanging around the office for fun. He had the luxury of being benevolent
Yeah.
because he wasn't competing for anything. And
I know.
so that mentality. But here's the reality I always tell people:
Mhm.
very few people are your actual competition. Like that
Yes.
woman who works in the same job as you, but at a different company, what are you actively competing for? Nothing. You don't work at the same company. So when
Yeah.
you start to think about like, is someone here, their success going to make my life worse? Or if they loved me and they thought I was amazing, would their
Mhm.
success just have the opportunity to help me rise? It's almost always the latter.
Yeah.
And so when we start to think about that, we can be a little bit more like clear-headed and benevolent. And so I do think that I have that characteristic, but I also think like I have a lot of luxuries in my career that allow me to be
Mm.
that way, right? I don't work with a lot of the people that I lift up and advise. So they're truly in other
Mm.
industries. They're not my
Mhm.
competition. And I work in an industry where you get a job for life if you're lucky, right? You get
Right.
tenure and then no
Mhm.
one can take it away from you. And so that gives you a lot of security. Once you get to that point,
Mhm.
prior to that point, you're like panicked that any
Yeah.
moment it could fall. But once you have it, it does allow you to be more generous and benevolent. And that's a structural thing.
Mhm.
But so what I would say to everybody is never underestimate the power of what one person can do. Like if we look at the science of people and how they feel about just their jobs in general, when you work for a great organization and you have a terrible boss, you hate your job. When you
Yeah.
work for a crappy organization and you have a great boss, you tend to love your job. And what
Mhm.
that means is one person can make a big difference in other people's lives.
Mhm.
So you can be like the reason someone else has a great day. You can be the reason that that woman that you see at the conference or work with like feels like she's amazing and has confidence, and encourage her. And you don't need to like wait for any level or title to do that. And just those like actions repeatedly, they build confidence and then people pay it forward. And so we can get there, but there's a science to why. And I think the
Yeah.
idea of when we see people who really feel like they're really competitive, it's because they've had to fight so hard to get where they are.
Yeah. Such a great point. If you get people out of survival, they can be that more benevolent person. And sometimes it takes a few years to get there. You saying that, I can think about my survival years and who I was then and who I am now, and they're different people. And some of that is potentially the environment that I was in and what that conditioned in me in order to, be able to survive and be here today. But yeah, such a great thought. And especially knowing too that you can be that person who takes an interest, who changes the internal dynamics is a very powerful statement. Awesome. I have a few other statements that I'd love for you to agree or disagree with and tell me more about the answer why. So, one of the statements is, what other people think and feel about me is none of my business. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. So I saw someone, I was actually researching what the origin was of this morning. I saw
Yeah.
someone with a tattoo. I wish I'd taken a photo of it, but it felt like weird to take a picture of someone's tattoo. This woman who had a tattoo on her shoulder, which is a saying that I wasn't familiar with, but apparently a thing. It
Yeah.
says care but don't carry.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
there's this idea of how do I wait? You're telling me that I should like focus on like what my audience thinks about me, but I have this whole idea of like I'm chasing validation and that's bad. Is people thinking positively about you is a tremendously important resource that will make your life better, right?
Yeah.
Try to get anything that matters to you. Try to get a date or a partner, get into college, get a
Mhm.
job with
Mhm.
someone who says, I think you're like an idiot and a jerk. It's not going to work. You
Yeah.
have to care about what other people think to a degree, because then that will affect how they behave toward you, and you can't exist in an island. So we need to care, but the
Mhm.
idea of not caring, of not letting another person's opinions define you. So
Mhm.
if I know that you don't like me, is
Mhm.
that important to me or not? Is it going to, if I think about those retirement party goals, is your negative opinion about me going to stand in my way of achieving those things? If it
Mm.
is, maybe I want to try to turn it around. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that while I'm doing that, I have to have a negative view of self. So trying
Mhm.
to separate other people's opinions as an important piece of data that could
Mhm.
have real impact on our lives without taking every single opinion and letting it, like, absorbing it into you,
Mhm.
to define who you are. And I think the latter I'm fully supportive with, but what I don't like is then when people say, like, "It doesn't matter what anyone thinks." And I'm like, "That's objectively false." Like, you try to
Yeah.
get promoted when no one thinks you do a good job. Like, does that not
Yes.
matter? Like, of course it matters. But we don't need to soak it in, right? And so I think this idea of
Yes.
caring but not carrying is, like, a good distinction for that.
I love that. I've never heard that phrase
I
before,
I
but it's
literally Googled
yeah,
this morning. I'm gonna take it to ChatGPT and figure out the origins.
origin, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, next statement. There is a game to power and influence.
Yeah, agree.
Yes.
And in the book, I talk about a definition of a game. Turns out that there's not, like, if you're in this space, people who are in the game space
Game theory,
debate
yeah. Yeah.
what the right definition of a game is. But I came across one that has some traction that I thought made a lot of sense, which was a game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude. And I like that because it makes
Yeah.
something like power and influence a game, which is it's a problem
Mhm.
to be solved. Getting you to agree with me, getting you to give me resources, that's a problem to solve. But I can approach it with this attitude of, like, joy and authenticity and levity. It doesn't have to be heavy. It can be honest and authentic, but joyful. And that's something that I very much agree with.
I love it. Okay. Likability is an inherent natural quality or tendency and not something that can be cultivated or learned.
Disagree. The psychologist says we teach people all of these things. We can learn all of these skills, right? And we have to figure out our way to show the world that, I would say, more even general than likability is like your way to show the world that you care. And what I always say to people is, like, do you care about people other than yourself? No one's ever said no. And I believe them. Everyone cares about somebody other than themselves. Okay, so you do care. Now you just have to figure out how to show it. And that is something that you can learn with practice. So I'm a just huge believer that all of these things are practice skills. Like, the more reps you get, the better you do.
I love it. I hear it all the time about public speaking. Oh, you're just a natural. You're not nervous. This is not something that I could ever be good at. So I love that take. So bringing my full self to work is not safe.
That one I'm going to neither agree nor disagree because I think that could be an accurate statement for some people. Like, it could be not safe if you're in the right. And I would say if you're in that environment and you have any choice, like, get out.
Uh-huh.
I think for some people it's untested. They believe it's
Ooh,
unsafe, but they haven't really explored really what that means. I
yeah.
also think for some people, they take whole self to literally mean whole self. There is, like, sometimes, like, I get really hangry and snappy. If don't talk to me
Yes.
after 8 p.m. I am nasty. I do not like the night. I like the morning. There are lots
Uh-huh.
of versions of myself that I'm not sure, like, my family really
Yes.
needs to see, let alone people that I'm actually, like, paying me to do work with them.
Uh-huh.
So I do think that the idea that if someone has to really, like, camouflage an element of their true identity in order to exist at work, that is not sustainable. That is
Mhm.
demoralizing. It's dehumanizing. It's not fun. But I also think this idea of not everything that is part of my authentic self necessarily, there's a time and place for all of it. And I talk to people a lot about this when they feel like if they're at all adapting, then they're departing from their authenticity. And I'm like, have you ever gone to a funeral? Have you ever felt like,
Mm,
I crack a lot of jokes. I don't crack a lot of jokes at funerals. It's not the right
mhm.
place, right?
Yeah.
I like, I actually do have quite an all black uniform. I might choose a
Oh,
different outfit at a funeral
yeah.
than I would choose to, like, go get coffee with my friends or go to a concert. I'm altering a version of myself because
Mhm.
it's appropriate for the environment. And why am I doing it? Because I want to say I care. And so it
Um,
is not inauthentic to inhibit a piece of yourself, to show a different side of yourself. We are complex, multifaceted individuals. And so I would say to somebody, yes, you should be able to bring your whole self, but the best version of your whole self, because not every version of yourself is something that like you're really proud to show. And that to alter who you are from moment to moment is
Mhm.
not the same as being inauthentic. It is simply choosing which facets of yourself you feel like you want to communicate in that particular moment.
Such a great point of clarification. And I feel like the funeral analogy is one that people immediately understand. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's like, of course I would do that. I'm like, was it inauthentic the way you behaved at the funeral? Now, it might have been a lot of emotional labor. Like, it
Sure.
was hard for me. And if I have to do that every day, it would be too much. And that's
Mhm.
true, even at work. Like, if I have to be so constrained, it'll feel like too much. But no one would ever say I was inauthentic because I wore a black dress and I wasn't cracking jokes.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear if there's anything new or exciting you're researching and kind of where you go from Likable Badass and from all the speaking that you're doing and what's next on your plate.
Yeah, so the 2025 for me is I just declared it just the year of status quo, meaning that
Mhm.
Likeable Badass has brought a lot of people and opportunities and
Mhm.
speaking and things into my life. And I said, I just want to, people make the analogy that have like writing a book is like birthing a child. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
sure.
like I just like have this toddler now. I just kind of want to like roll with a toddler. So 2025 is the year of status quo. I'm looking at a variety of different things, maybe writing another book that I would like to do, doing more work reaching individuals. So one of the reasons I wrote the
Mhm.
book is that for my entirety of my life as a psychologist, I do deliver a lot of content to individuals, but the only way people really get to access me is if they're basically part of a group, like they
Mhm.
are getting their MBA or their
Mhm.
organization has a leadership development program. One of the things I want to do with the book was just to become more accessible, to put behavioral science in the hands of lots of people who would never do those kind of things, but still are learning and growing. And so doing more work that enables me to reach individuals directly. So thinking about like programs for individuals that I'm looking at creating and things like that. That's been more where my head is right now, is how to kind
Amazing.
of like democratize the
Mhm.
science that we have, because so much of it, even though like I serve an underserved group in the sense that I do a lot of work for
Mhm.
women, I'm still
Mhm.
serving really advantaged women by definition
Sure.
who
Mhm.
are employed by large corporations, who are employed at
Yeah.
all, who are getting,
Yeah.
degrees, these kind of things. And so I'm trying to think about how to make it more accessible.
I love that. And just two last questions. If you had 1 hour to put together a 10-minute talk on something totally unrelated to your research, what would be the subject that you would choose and why?
Great question. I would probably talk about organizing your physical space. So if I were not a
Oh,
professor, I think I would be a like, professional organizer. And I wanted to have something where you went into like messy, like male professional offices, like the one my husband has.
oh, yes.
And just, like, do, like, a total makeover. I wanted to do a show called Executive Order, where you just took, like, leaders whose lives like, my husband's, like, the guy who has 30,000 emails in his inbox, and I
Oh,
just can't
boy.
even look at it without getting hives. So, I would really wanna do something about just, like, the psychology of cleaning up your space, which other people have already claimed, which is why I don't think
Yes.
there's space for me there, but I am, like, just fanatical about that. I'm the person who, like, can't work until you've gone through the entire house and clean it, which makes working at home a little bit challenging.
Hard. Yeah. I
How
love
very
that. I love
clean.
Executive Order is a great title.
I
Great
know, right?
title. Okay. And if you had to put one phrase on a t-shirt that kind of summarize either your work, your philosophy, how you think about things, something that you want to convey to the world, what would that be and why?
Other than Likable Badass, which already exists on our
Yes.
t-shirts and hats and things like
Yes.
that. Okay, this is what I would wanna say, although it's a bad t-shirt slogan, so but
Mhm.
I will do it, is that authentic and strategic are not opposites. Like, that's really what
Ooh.
I want. Again, no one's gonna wear that t-shirt, but the idea there that I think is such an important thing, particularly for women, is just I'm such
Mhm.
a believer in authenticity, but when people
Mhm.
talk about authenticity, they're often implied is this idea that means I do what I want without any regard for any consequences whatsoever. And I think
Yes.
there's another space, which is one can be authentic and
Mhm.
one can also be strategic, intentional of thinking about what the consequences of those actions are. That's where I think like something like lifting other people up and being
Mhm.
another promoter for them is a very authentic activity for people. Yet it also is really strategic because they are likely to do it for you. And that's an example of something where you can really own both spaces. But it won't offend me if you don't print that t-shirt.
No, I love that. I think that those two do seem like, I think sometimes strategic can veer a little bit towards manipulative,
Exactly.
or yeah, or you're plotting as you're doing things. So I think that's a very important distinction. So for everyone who's listening who wants to learn more about you, wants to get your book, we'll have all the links in the show notes. But any final parting thoughts and things that you want the women of the spotlight to take away from your story, Jen?
I would just say just be yourself, like in the most like intentional way possible, right? Because none of this is about having to be better than you are. All it is just maximum credit for the greatness you've already achieved.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Allison. And this has been another great episode of the Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast. Thank you for listening in to today's episode of the Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast with our very special guest, Alison Fragale. This episode exceeded my wildest expectations, even though they were pretty high. I am so lucky to have had the introduction to Allison from great friend of the podcast, Jen Hill, who went to school with her back in the day at Dartmouth College. Allison covered so much incredible ground with me today, from her 3 ways of building social capital, from self-promotion, promotion of others, and asking for promotion, to direct and applicable advice for us as women in commercial real estate, dealing with a massive retirement of the baby boomer generation, which represents 40% of our industry and nearly 60% of all of our leaders over the next 10 to 15 years. I think she had great wisdom and insights and so many tips that we can take and put into our practices, whether at home or at work. I especially love the thought of the retirement party and the 3 different accomplishments or the 3 different traits you'd like to be described as, and reverse engineering and using that as a tool or a lens to make decisions about what you're doing today, tomorrow, and the next day. So a very big thank you again to Alison Fragale for spending her valuable time with us right before she got on a plane and jetted off to her next keynote in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'd like to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? If you enjoy our podcast, please like, review, rate, and share our podcast on social media platforms, and feel free to reach out with any questions or suggestions for future episodes. We are so glad that you're here and listening to the Spotlight, a Women Speak CRE podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.